Hi everyone, this is MSY's Research Notes. Yesterday we have talked about the discussion part, uh, the first part of the discussion, and today we'll move to the next part, and we'll hopefully finish the overall essay. And today about my research progress, I have already finished the first part of the second chapter of the literature review, which is about the near-peer teaching. And I have already concluded this part, and I have already finished the final transition part, and I have already tried to link this kind of overall section to the next part, which is the dialogic teaching. However, I have found a kind of problem, which is about the word limit. In order to publish this kind of essays or studies onto some journals, um, we need to absolutely comply with the word limit, which is generally 8,000 words. But now, after writing the first section of the second chapter of the literature review, I noticed that I have already reached about 1,600 words, which is a little bit. I think it's too many, simply too many. So probably I need to cut some words. Well, but I think for most of the parts that I have written down, they are necessary and they serve as kind of different kind of functions in my essays. So probably I'll just finish the whole essay and then try to try to cut some part of the literature review because there are too many words here. Well, but we have to say that this essay is quite different from other essays because in this essay you can see that the literature review part is not merely about the summary or the evaluation of other literatures. We are also proposing our own behaviors or the teaching behaviors that we introduced, which is PRTB in our essay. So it's not merely about reviewing or evaluation of other essays, but it's a kind of process of putting out the real behaviors or concrete behaviors of our teaching approach. So you can see that this is very unlike. This is a very unique literature review, which is quite different from other essays. So basically, based on this kind of uniqueness, we naturally won't follow the word limit of other essays. So probably in the methodology or the results part, we can save more words and put all of them here in the literature review part, which I think is a clever decision compared with blindly following the rule or the structure of other essays. So this is just our plan and our design of the literature review part. Well, so this is just my research progress right now, and I need to move to the previous essay, which I have introduced yesterday and for the past several days. And the last part is about the discussion. And the discussion I have talked about, for example, the limitations, which is the last paragraph of the discussion part. The limitation is linked to several factors. And the authors, they explained why this limitation occurred, or we can see it as a kind of detailed explanation of the reasons for the limitations. And naturally, yesterday I stopped at this point, and I'll move on to the pros and cons of this limitation. Like what I've introduced yesterday, limitation is not just about confessing your the confinement of your experiment. Is also a way of showing the legitimacy of your experiment or the overall study, the design of your essay. So you can see here that the author then said the upside of this study is, whereas the downside is So this part is not only admitting the limitations, but also showing the advantages of such a design. So in my essay, this kind of short-term intervention is a limitation, and we shall also include some advantages, especially, being close to the real implementation, because PRTB is a kind of teaching program or teaching behaviors, which is specifically designed for short-term intervention, especially designed for near peers, just like university undergraduate students who serve as English or volunteer teachers in some junior or senior high schools. So naturally, in reality, this kind of intervention won't last long, and this is exactly one reason why we designed this kind of short intervention instead of a kind of long intervention. Even though you can see this as a kind of limitation, you can also, call it a kind of imitation, or a kind of just a kind of imitation of the reality, because we wanted to really implement this kind of teaching behaviors in the real circumstances. So we need to absolutely follow the real timeline, which is normally a kind of short intervention program. So this is our limitation, but we can also say it's our advantages, it's our design. So I think that this example can properly or appropriately illustrate the writing technique of the discussion part, which is absolutely confessing your limitations or the confinement of your experiment, but also you need to tell the readers that you designed this kind of experiment in this way due to some reasons, and those reasons can serve as like a proof or the declaration of legitimacy of your experiment. So this is the writing technique we can see from here. And the second limitation is that a pseudo-longitudinal study is not really a longitudinal study, though it can provide. So you can see here, this is a similar writing technique, because the authors, they firstly admitted the flaws or the confinement of their experiment, and then they immediately said, although it can provide a certain thing. So even though they didn't directly point out the advantages of pseudo-longitudinal experiment, they used this word although or though to serve as a kind of a kind of different aspect of their limitations, which is the advantages. So though it can provide some certain thing which are good things, so those good things can serve as the reasons why they choose this kind of pseudo-longitudinal experiment. So instead of directly pointing out those their advantages, they chose this kind of though or although to show the legitimacy of their experiment. So this is the combination of another limitation and its advantages and or value. So it's just like the previous upside technique, not only admitting the limitations, but also showing the value, providing the legitimacy of the current study. But those values are generally embedded in the sentence. They didn't really directly point out the legitimacy or the advantages of the experimental design. So, well, this is how I understand here this kind of similar writing techniques, and we can see that it has already, occurred, or we have already captured this kind of writing technique twice. So it's a very frequently used one. And then they introduced the demographic details of each age group. But however, this part is a little bit confusing. In the end of this part, the authors they quote DeWell's previous research and showed the function of this part. Well, that is providing a pseudo-longitudinal experiment, which is to prove a pseudo-longitudinal experiment can also yield yield data with good quality. Well, so this is also used to prove the legitimacy of the research methods, which is the pseudo-longitudinal experiment. So here, pseudo-longitudinal is very unlike to be a real longitudinal experiment. So I think the authors, they put much emphasis on, they put more emphasis on this part, because probably a single sentence or a single paragraph can hardly, can hardly prove the legitimacy, or can hardly, thoroughly tell the readers that their experiments are correct or are acceptable at least. So this is probably one reason why they quoted Professor DeWell's study. So I think this also tells us that when you're writing your discussion part, probably there are some detrimental flaws or confinements in your study. Unlike the previous example that I have mentioned in my own essay, which is a kind of short time intervention, unlike this kind of acceptable limitations, you may sometimes encounter some probably unacceptable ones, or some very harmful or detrimental ones. And in that case, you'd better quote some well-known professors or scholars' studies who also used this kind of technique or methodological design. Well, I have another example which is also in my essay. Well, in order to capture the moment-to-moment fluctuations in foreign language enjoyment, I didn't actually use I didn't use some established methodologies. For example, the ideodynamic methodology, which was designed by Professor McIntyre. Well, actually, why I didn't use that kind of technique is because you need to buy, or at least you need to implement this kind of cardiogram electrode, which is a kind of a sensor that is attached onto your skin, and to capture the fluctuations of your emotions, or the electrode of your heart, or just like the beating of your heart. So it's a kind of it is a kind of equipment that can be hardly used in reality or in classrooms, because you simply cannot give. My sample has already reached more than 800, so it's impossible to give more than 800 students like a kind of sensor for every one of them. And moreover, ideodynamic approach is precisely designed to capture the fluctuations of a single participant instead of being used in a kind of classroom. So this kind of ideodynamic approach is impossible here. And for other approaches, for example, if you ask a student to, if they feel a kind of enjoyment, a sense of enjoyment, then they write that kind of emotion down during the classroom, then it's a kind of disturbance for them, because they won't totally focus on the classroom, on the materials. So for most of their attention is attributed to, some part of their attention is paid to, feeling for example, the questionnaire, or writing down their emotions during class. So this is also, even though you can capture probably their moment-to-moment fluctuations, you still face some problems, which is, probably students won't totally focus on the course materials, or they simply won't frequently write down their emotions, and it's very hard for you to capture the time, and especially the association with different behaviors, because we want to examine the effects of PRTB, and we want to examine the individual. We want to examine the individual behaviors and the individual effects of each behavior. Therefore, we must find a kind of link or association between the behaviors and the fluctuations of FLE. So how to find this kind of association or so in order to capture the associations of behaviors and FLE, we must design a kind of method to capture that. Well, in the existing studies, we haven't found such kind of method which can capture both of them. So we have to design a kind of method which can be used here in our experiment. But I mean, absolutely designing a kind of method, we need some proof. Just like designing a scale, we need to use the principal component analysis or some other way of analysis to prove that this kind of scale is legitimate, or it can, after using this kind of scale, you can get data which can show which can yield, at least accurate result. So this is like a process of designing a kind of methodology instead of, especially a methodology to capture the real data. So I need loads of theories. Anyway, I definitely need to confess my limitations and to confess the exploratory nature, of the methodology. So this is something that I need to remind myself. And I think when I am writing the discussion part, I absolutely need to look back to the research notes and probably at that time, I'll write the discussion part probably at the end of the next month, the end of April. So probably I still need like 30 days or 25 days. Because I'm still writing the literature review part. Although I have already finished the methodology, I still need like 30 days. And I think after a month, I could have finished the overall project. Well, so this is basically the discussion part, and the last part is the conclusion. And the conclusion, I think, is just like rewriting the overall structure of the essay. And firstly, it's about the research design and the research aim, and 4 research questions and participants. So you can see that those are the most important things in this essay, like how you design this essay, what's your purpose, explaining why you do this, and 4 research questions, which is more concrete compared with the first one, which is the research design. So and then they listed the participants, which is also a crucial part here. And the author used one sentence to link, those items that I have mentioned above. So this is a part which really tests the writing technique. Only use one sentence to link, all those necessary details here. So this is the first sentence, and the second sentence is then the authors, they reported the results and findings in accordance to research questions. Well, so this part resembles the results part, including the structure or the logic. The authors, they reported the results in accordance with the research questions. So you can see that they are repeating their structure, and I think this is also very clear. And after reading the results, you can see a kind of similar pattern here, and it's very helpful for readers to grasp your logic again. So this is a kind of writing technique which is following the previous structure, and and also I've mentioned some other technique which other techniques which can help readers to improve their reading comprehension, which is writing the topic sentence at the very beginning and the transitional sentence at the very end. So at last, to conclude, the configuration of factors that underlie our participants' classroom emotions evolve at different speeds over time. Well, so this is just like the discussion part, which summarizes or explains their findings. So to repeat, they said, to conclude, the configuration of factors that underlie our participants' classroom emotions evolve at different speeds over time. They actually didn't include all these discussions here, but they only pointed out one, the most salient or the most conspicuous one here, which is the configuration of factors. And this corresponds with the most important research question, which is the research question 3. So you can see that the authors spend most of the paragraphs writing and discussing research question 3, and at the very end, they also pointed out this kind of part as the most crucial one here, and they didn't mention other discussions. So you can see this is the most important finding in this essay, and this is also the end of this essay. So actually we have finished this essay, and for other essays, I think tomorrow I will continue to introduce a new one, which is enhancing physics learning with cognitively activating instruction, a quasi-experimental classroom intervention study. Why I introduced this is because I want to analyze the writing structure of this essay. Because in this essay, the authors, they also proposed a new way of classroom teaching. Even though it's about physics, I can still learn a lot of like writing techniques, or at least the structures of this essay. So I think it's very helpful for me to write my own essays, because at least I can see when and where the authors, they firstly like pointed out their teaching behaviors and how concretely they described their teaching approach, or this kind of teaching method. So I think I can absolutely imitate their writing structure and learn some of their writing techniques. So this is why I choose this essay as the next one to be introduced. Well, so this is basically today, and this is MSY's research notes, and it's very late at night, and I have to go now. Well, so hope to see you tomorrow. Good night.